Hello motorcycle enthusiasts. Today's topic is how to properly adjust the float level on the carburetor. You need a caliper gauge, a needle nose pliers, a small slotted screwdriver, and you need the tool to open the float chamber cover. Take a look in the video description after you've finished watching the clip so you can get more info about that particular carb. Here's another thing. People often ask, is Carb Daddy making money with this? Well, not enough to get rich and live like Paris Hilton, but we do earn a little something when you get rebuild kits and other bits and pieces using our links, and that lets us keep producing these little videos, and maybe grow a little too. And not to boast or brag, but these are top-notch businesses that sell top-of-the-shelf, quality products, not some crap made in some dicey sweatshop. So use the links and help us keep all of this going so all of us can keep these awesome bikes going for years to come. Before we start, I have to show you something. This is the float needle valve. Back there, the float needle valve has a small pin. This is spring-loaded. This is important to know because it plays a big role. I will now show you why. Here we have the float. This is a hollow body. The one I have here is made of plastic, but it also comes in different variations. And here you see this wire hanger. This is also the one we have here. And this metal tongue you see here, that's stuck in between here, between the pin and the wire hanger. And now it's time to adjust the height. The float height is the distance between here and the highest point of the float, measured at right angles from this edge. If there is another measurement method, then we write it in the video description of the respective carburetor. Like for example with the RF600 or the RF900. Now the float must rest on this pin, but don't have to push it in. If I push it in here, it comes back up on its own, and that's what the little spring-loaded pin does. Now I turn the carburetor this way, it can cause the float to push in a little on its own, by its own weight. That is, you have to find a point to set the carburetor in this way, that the float does not push the pin in by itself, so that the sheet metal tongue sits loosely and does not press against it, so that this bounces. Now measure the distance, at a right angle, from the edge of the carb to the highest point of the float and set it correctly. I will show you this again with another example. It is also important, if the float looks out too far and the distance is too large as a result, then you have to bend this small metal tongue. Bend it in this direction, so upwards, but please be very careful. So if I bend the metal tongue in this direction, the float can get a little bit further down. Then I can reduce this distance. If the distance is too small, then I have to bend the metal tongue inward. This is the whole principle. Please be careful with the adjustment. There is still something important to know. This is here as an example a carburetor of the JIS 500E. Here the framework of the float looks a little different. Here the float chamber cover presses on it, here, and here. So if I don't press on the scaffold of the float here and adjust it like this, I have a distorted float level. So with a construction like this, it's important to always press the scaffold against the carburetor, as if the lid is resting on the carburetor. Now take the caliper gauge and measure at right angles. In my example, I would have to correct the float position and set it correctly. The float must come out a little further. On this carburetor, you can reach the metal tongue from the front to adjust the float level. This is the one. Now I push down a little and check the float level again. A small piece is still needed. So once again bend a little bit at the metal tongue. Now you have seen how to adjust the float position. I continue this float position without camera. But here I have another example for you. A GSX 600F with the same contraction. Here we are almost at the ideal, it is almost touching. You can leave it like this. Manuals say plus or minus 1 mm. It is important that you see how the construction looks. Here it is again a little different, but in the basis the procedure is always the same. Place the carburetor in such a way that the float is not pushed in by its own weight, and then adjust your float position. Here is a small edge on the housing of the carburetor. There you measure from here below, so not on the higher edge. And always measure to the highest point of the float. I hope you enjoyed the video and appreciate your support with a like and a subscription from you. I wish you much success with your project and have fun following along. See you in the next video of the Carb King.